next step in our learning, we'll build this card from scratch. And as you'll see, it gives us a number of Flexbox tips and tricks to learn. Okay, let's get started. Now, if I open this in a brand new tab, you'll see it's entirely blank. And that's because we will be starting from scratch. Okay, so if we're creating a card, well, I'm going to show you in 2 different ways how you can structure the CSS. To begin, we'll use a traditional approach. So we'll give it a class name of card. And then within here, once again, I will link to an app.css file. All right, and let's switch over to that file. And of course, it is blank. Okay, so as always, we're going to begin with the structure. If I switch back to our prototype, we can see, all right, well, this represents the full card, and it looks like it's split into 2 sections. So you have a side here on the left, and you have a side here on the right. Okay, let's get started with that. Once again, I have 2 sections here, and we'll say the left side, just temporarily, and the right side. Okay, what do we have within it? Well, on the right side, we'll have a heading here. And then we'll have some text below it. Okay, what else? It looks like we have this meta information at the very bottom. So I'm going to add another div here and paste all of that in. But you'll see it looks like we have 2 little SVG icons. So I'm going to grab the image address, paste that in. And then the same thing down here. And I happen to know what that is. It's called clock. Okay, so if we come back and give that a refresh, here's what we currently have. So the right side is mostly done. On the left side, we have a button. We have a thumbnail. I'll grab the address right now, and then the difficulty below. All right, so right up here, we'll have our button. It's called PHP. Next, we have the thumbnail below it. So I will paste that in. Now you'll notice in this case, the SVGs, I don't have them locally. So we're just referencing a different folder in my project. Okay, and then finally, intermediate difficulty at the bottom. All right, and I think that should do it as far as the structure is concerned. But here we go again. We're Backend developers. We're trying to do our best. And once again, we're overwhelmed. All right, we take it step by step. So what's the first thing we can see here? All right, well, there's a shadow all around it. Now, you can create shadows on your own, or often if you're working with a designer, they'll give you a shadow that they want to use. So we're going to grab this one ourselves. Let's switch back to Sublime. I'm going to go to my app.css file, and right here, I'll paste this in. Okay, now mostly, you don't need to worry about this too much. It's a fancy box shadow. You can see we have 2 different shadows. So the first one, we're saying, don't go to the right at all, but put the shadow a little bit below. We want the strength of the shadow to be about 8 pixels, and then here's the opacity. So it should be black, but at about 12% opacity. And then we just add a second one there. Don't worry about it too much at all. This is the sort of thing, once again, that the designer on your team might give you. Okay, so if we come back and give this a refresh, now at least we can see our box. However, in situations like this, you'll likely have an explicit width and height. So with that in mind, once again, assuming we were given this information, we can go ahead and grab it. All right. So we'll come back and paste that in. Every card should have these dimensions. Refresh. Okay. Next, just for convenience, I want this card in the center of the page. Well, we already learned about that, right? We can do that with Flexbox. So just for our demo, we're going to apply it directly to the body element. Display of flex, align the items to the center, and then justify the content to the center. But now, this often trips people up because they'll come back and refresh, and it's justified to the center, but not aligned. And that's because the body's only going to take up as much space as it needs to. So let's say for the HTML and the body, we'll explicitly set a height of 100%. All right, so now if I come back and give it a refresh, it is now perfectly centered. All right, what next? Piece by piece. Well, we did say one of the first things we said is this is on the left and this is on the right. And we separated that into 2 divs here. So this is left, this is right, which means on the parent, we can apply Flexbox. All right, come back and give that a refresh. All right, now it's starting to come into shape. The next thing I see is this blue gradient. And once again, this is the sort of thing you'll get in Photoshop, or you can, of course, make these values on the fly. All right, so let's switch back. And it sounds like right here, we need a way to target this. Now, you can always do things like this. You could always do card and then give me the very first div. And yes, that will target that div specifically. So back, refresh, yeah, but if you ever decide to change things around, it's just a little bit brittle. So instead, let's apply a class of either card aside or card left. A lot of people don't like doing left and right, and that's because, well, if you later decide this should go on the other side, your class name is no longer correct. It's a valid criticism. I find in practice it's just not much of an issue. If you need to change it, you can. But otherwise, yeah, if you want, you can do something like card aside, card secondary, whatever you want. I like to keep it simple though. Okay, so now I'll be explicit here. Card left will have that background gradient. Here you can see we want a linear gradient that goes to the bottom, starting at this shade of blue, ending at that shade of blue. So if I come back and give this a refresh, we have our gradient. Okay, but next I want a little bit of breathing room. So you'll see the text is right up against the edge there. We need to give it some room to breathe. All right, let's set margin right of about 20 pixels, and we'll try that out. There we go, a little more room to breathe. All right, next up, the text is still the default, Times New Roman. So let's go ahead and grab Open Sans once again. And here, we'll customize it. We'll grab regular, semi-bold, and bold. And then I can grab this link here and then reference it. Okay, so we'll come back. Now you'll see I've already pulled that in, but just for your reference. And then if we come back here, I can set the font family. Okay, that should make a big difference. Next, you'll notice that we have no padding along the edges, so the text runs all the way to the end, which always looks horrible. Now, you want to be a little careful though, because you can't apply it directly to the card element. Take a look. If you do that, well, you're going to ruin the background color here. That's not what we want. So instead, it needs to be applied to both of the child elements. So here, if I were to say padding of 20 pixels, and then on the right as well, you get the idea. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply that. For the card left and card right, we want padding of 20 pixels. Next, you'll see that the bulk of the text here is kind of a lightish gray. So this is the same as this, but the heading is a different color. That's okay. Let's come to the card right. We'll do it here. And we'll set a color of about 888. Refresh. Okay, that brings it down a touch. But now for the card title, well, let's give that a class name. Now, you'll notice we're using this convention. So if our component name is card, then all of the sub-elements will be card dash and then whatever it's called. This is very common. There's also a BIM syntax where maybe you'll name the component card, and then this would then be called card right or card primary. This would be card title. It's just a convention. You can do anything you want here. Anyways, if we come back, we'll say for the card title, the color should be a darker gray, almost black. However, it's not taking effect, and that's because the default styling for an anchor tag is taking precedence. So we could say color inherit from your parent. There you go. Let's also remove the text decoration. No underline. Now it does look like the title, if we go back to our original source, the title is a little thinner and a little larger. So let's play with this. Maybe 1.4 ems? Yeah, let's go up. 1.7. And then let's bring down the font weight. So let's do maybe 600. Yeah, a little bit thinner. But now you'll see, because we increased the height, we're getting some of that margin there. So we should try to zero out the margin top to push it back up, right? All right. Now, what about the margin bottom? Let's see, can we get rid of that as well? A lot of the time, you're just tinkering around. It's not an actual science. You're just playing. Would it look better if I did this? Can I get rid of this spacing? I'd love to say you always know the exact setting you need, but often you're kind of tinkering around a little bit. All right, next you'll notice that this meta information here is at the very bottom. It's locked to the bottom. But at the moment, it's right below the paragraph. No matter how short or long that paragraph is, it comes right after it. So if we want to lock it down here, once again, Flexbox to the rescue. So take a look at this. We're going to go to our card right, set a display of flex, Come back, give that a refresh. And again, the default direction is left to right as a row. So we're going to say flex direction as column. Vertical is the default. Refresh. Now, take a look. For this element here, our paragraph, we could set a flex of 1. So you can flex to take up all available space. And as a result, it's going to push this down. Another option you can consider if you don't want to do that is you could say margin top is auto. So automatically set the margin on the top, which means it will push down as far as it can. And if you were to do margin bottom, it'll do the inverse, which is also what we want. So let's apply that. Right here, we'll give it a name, and we'll say this is the excerpt for this series in this case. So right here, card excerpt, flex of 1. All right, so give that a refresh, and now it is locked at the bottom. And yeah, just to prove it to you, if we were to change this, like let's get rid of some of this text at the end, yeah, it's still locked to the bottom. Okay, but we'll give that a refresh. Now, I just noticed, it looks like here we have, what is it, around 20 pixels worth of space, but in this case, we have quite a bit more. So let's see what's going on. On card right, we added 20 pixels of padding, but on card left, we added margin right of 20 pixels. So that's a little redundant. It looks like we don't need that after all. So we can come back and remove that. Okay, next, let's focus our eyes down here. I want a little breathing room between these two. So if we take a look, this section is kind of like the meta information for the series. So why don't we do this? Why don't we wrap each one within a div or a span, whatever you want. Then here, I can apply some margin right. So let's do that. Card meta, and get that first one, and we'll add a margin right of about 1em. Okay, refresh, but now, once again, because we wrapped those within divs, they're going to display as block level elements. So here, yet again, we reach for display of flex. And this is what I mean. It's the bedrock. You're going to reach for this constantly. So card meta should have a display of flex. All right, refresh. Next, something you'll often need to do is align your icon with the text it corresponds to. So let's try this. We'll begin by setting a font size a little bit lower, like 0.8 ems. Okay, now notice the clock, it's just a little higher up than it should be, if you can see that. Let's hover over it. Yeah, notice the text comes to the end of the highlight there, but the clock is a good bit up. All right, once again, Flexbox to the rescue. So we'll say font size is 0.8 ems, and then what I want to do is target each of these. So here you could say, if you want to give it a class, you can. Otherwise, we could say card meta div display of flex. Give that a refresh. And now it looks like on the image, we need to add a little bit of space to the right. Now, if you're using something like SAS, of course, you can use nested selectors, but we can't do that in this case. Margin right of about 8 pixels. You could even create a little component for this as well, by the way. As you can imagine, associating an icon with text is something very, very common. So yeah, you could have a component called icon that would do this for you. Anyways, now those are lined up. But if you ever need to, don't forget, you can always say, align all of the items to the center. And that will, once again, by default, vertically center things. In this case, that's already correct, though. All right, so the right side's looking fairly good. Let's go to our original. Yeah, a couple differences. Maybe the title could be a little bit lighter. Let's go to 500. Yeah, a little bit lighter. But yeah, if you take a look at the right on each side, it's more or less the same, give or take a few pixels. So now we can focus our attention to the left side. The first thing I see is that they are centered here. So let's start with that. If we go to card left, well, yeah, let's just try doing text align center and give that a refresh. Good. It looks like we also want to distribute the items using justify contents, right? Let's give that a shot. Display of flex, justify the content, space between. All right, one more time, we'll give that a refresh, but now it's displaying as a row, so we have to say flex direction is column. There we go, perfect. So let's go over that one more time, because that might have been a little fast. So we'll turn these on one at a time. So we set a display of flex. that will by default have a direction of row. So we say, no, I want you to render as a column, not left to right, but top to bottom. Then we say justify content. We want the space between each of these items to be the same, and that will give you a nice distribution there. Next, if we come back, let's see. This will be the card difficulty, and we'll adjust that. So maybe right here. That will be a color of white, and we'll bring down the font size. There we go. And then finally, the skill button here. Let's see, right there. Let's give that a class of card skill button, or link, whatever you want to call it. Let's style that. Now, we know we want there to be a background color, right? But as we discussed a couple episodes ago, it's useful when you can use alpha transparency to set the background color. So for example, if I want it slightly darker than this blue that it sits on top of, well, let's just do this. RGBA, and if 255, 255, 255 is white, 000 is going to be black. So let's look at that to start. And 1 means 100% visible. All right, so we have full black. Now I'm going to bring it down to 60%. Refresh, and yeah, now we're letting some of that blue underneath sink through. So now I'm going to bring it down to 30%, and yeah, we're mostly just playing around to get the color we need. That's fine for now. Next, we don't want it to be blue. It should have a color of white, or in this case, it looks like this entire left side of the card should have a color of white. So let's set it at the parent level. That way I can remove it here and here. All right, refresh. But once again, the default styling for the anchor is taking precedence. So I can say color is inherit. The main goal being I can define the white in one place versus every single sub-element. There we go. All right, and let's say text decoration, none. Once again, things like this are very common, so it might be useful to extract a utility class for that. There you go. Let's make the font size about 0.7 ems as well. There we go. Give it a little padding. Notice I'm just going a few steps at a time. This is what you'll often do. Add some styling, take a look, tweak it, and then go back. Next, these edges should be rounded, right? Border or radius, and yeah, we want it as round as it can possibly go. People often do things like this. All right, so if we come back and refresh, that's looking pretty good to me, but it's a little too long. So let's try this out. Let's go to the card left, and let's try align items to the center. And yeah, in this case, remember, because we set flex direction to column, the axis for align items and justify contents will reverse. So that's why, in this case, justify content space between is affecting the vertical layout. So now for align items, we're just making sure everything's in the center, and we can override that. Okay, so now here, you can add padding however much you need to. Maybe, how about 20? Maybe 25 pixels, whatever you think looks good. All right. So let's add align items to the center. Close this out, give it a refresh, and yeah, we can tweak a few more things. I think this text is a little large, but yeah, not too bad for roughly 10 minutes worth of work. In fact, one quick thing, we forgot to do that. So we'll add 10 pixels to the card, and that takes care of this and this, but we also want to make sure this left side and the inner are rounded as well. So let's apply that here. There we go. Now it looks how it did originally. But anyways, notice how when we began, you get that overwhelming feeling. I don't even know where to begin. And it's just a card. It's not even a full site. You just take it one step at a time. So you basically go for the low-hanging fruit. All right, well, there's a shadow around it, so let's create the box. Then this is to the left, and this is to the right. All right, let's set display of flex. Then, one by one, you just go through the elements. Okay, let's tweak this heading. Let's make sure this is at the bottom. Let's align these. You're just doing it one step at a time. And before long, you have your completed card. Good job.